All right, so if you are one of my Foundry kids, if you're one of my honored guests, I'm going to try to do like half as good of a job as your teachers do downstairs, right? What's up, buddy? And then if you are one of our parents and you're like, man, this is probably an unforgiving, distracting room, I assure you that I've been in far more hostile rooms than this one, and like you're cool. I promise, you're cool. Be present and enjoy. So kids, I want you to check out the screen and see a little something. There's different kind of like ways in which people over the course of history and time have sort of dedicated themselves to being a fan of a team or a fan of a band or a fan of a thing. And there's more than just this, but like one example is from the 1970s until last year, if you liked the rock band Kiss and you wanted to go see them, you might paint your face similar to that. Okay? Or if you got a ticket to the Eras Tour, if you're a Swiftie, you might make a friendship bracelet that like sort of pays homage to some of your favorite Taylor Swift lyrics. And that might be a way that you say, yay, Taylor Swift. You may or may not know this if you're not from Michigan, but like people in the city of Detroit throw octopus on the ice during certain times of year to celebrate strategic like playoff moments or milestones in Detroit ice hockey lore. If you are a fan of the Green Bay Packers, you unironically wear a foam piece of cheese on your head to say, let's go Packers. And then of course here in Baltimore with the Ravens and the Orioles, we have things that we do. Like if you've ever heard people scream, oh, during the national anthem, they don't do that everywhere. And sometimes you feel a little weird if you do it somewhere else. All right? These are just some of the ways people say, I love this team, and this is how I express it. Jesus, in this particular section that we're looking at today, is trying to help people understand the ways in which they practice their love for God. Okay? So, like, in the last section that you weren't upstairs with me last week, and you may not have been here last week if you're one of the grown-ups, we said, hey, there's things that Jesus was saying, and instead of just like walking around looking well-behaved and saying, those are the people that really get it, there's a messier thing I'm inviting you to do, which is to say, hey, you've got some anger and some fear and some hard things going on in your heart, and I want to help you with that stuff. In fact, that's kind of why I'm here. So this section in Matthew 6 is about practicing our righteousness. How do we practice and show people that we want to be on Jesus' team? And he uses 3 examples of things people did then and people do now to like show people what their allegiance is, okay? So he talks about praying, and he talks about giving to the poor, and he talks about fasting. If you're one of my kids, I'm going to need you to make a face and strike a pose here in just a minute. Your parents are really going to need your help with this, okay? Because they don't listen and learn as well as you do, okay? So the first example, he's talking about giving to the needy, and he says, when you give to the poor, when you give to people that have needs, you don't have to like blow trumpets and make a parade, because that really is more about you trying to look really proud, like you're posing for something. So if you're one of my kids, you can stand, you can sit, whatever, but I want you to look at your parents and make the face that you make when you're like really proud of yourself, like when you've done something really important and you want them to notice. Like, you know, like you're, like, yeah, okay, you did it? Did they do it, parents? Did they help you with that? Did you get it? Okay, cool. The second example is he gives with prayer, where, hey, instead of like walking in the streets and like standing in the middle, like demonstrating like with big motions how important your prayers are, or instead of using big words like, dearest Father, we beseech thee to acquiesce expediently to our magnanimous problems that we're facing. Instead of like doing that and proving how smart you are, like come to God with like your real stuff. And the point of that, you know, like Jesus is saying, hey, the people that do that are just kind of walking around showing like how good they are, how well behaved they are. So I want you to turn to your parents, little ones. We're here, my Foundry Kids guests, my honored guests. Make your angelic face. Make the face you make when you're trying to convince your parents that you didn't do anything wrong, that like you did not hit your brother. Oh, you look so. Oh, you've been so good. Okay. The last one is fasting. Now, fasting is like not eating food or drink for a period of time, to dedicate ourselves to pray and acknowledge that something's really serious. It's not like showing God that we're so serious so God gives us what we want. It's sort of stopping to say, hey, we're in a really serious moment, so we got to be serious, and we're going to stop doing some things to do this. Now, what some people liked to do back then, and maybe they still do it today, is when you get to this place, they want to like walk in the street and show you like how much they've been suffering in their time of fasting. My Foundry guest friends, is there ever a time when your parents ask you to do something and you just need to let them know that it's tremendously painful? Oh, putting the toys away? Oh, it's so hard for me to do this thing. So make the face that you make when you're doing the thing that you don't really want to do, but you want to like show your parents that you're really not happy with it. Like, we have this bath time thing every night, but every night I'm acting like it's surprising that we have bath time. You know, like do that kind of thing. Okay, Jesus says, okay, here's the deal. For the grown-ups that walk around doing that, showing how much they're on Team God, they will get some attention. People will notice. They'll notice that pained face. They'll notice that angelic face and the fancy words. And they'll notice the big trumpet and the parade. But that's kind of it. It kind of stops there. It's sort of silly, isn't it? It would be like dressing your face up to go see Kiss and then like hanging out in the Penn Station subway looking in the mirror. Going, oh, look at this face paint. Or going to the parking lot of the Eras Tour and going, man, let's just make friendship bracelets. We don't need to see this music, even though we've spent hundreds of dollars to see an artist we like. Or to go to see your favorite like sports team and just sort of spend the whole time taking selfies instead of paying attention to the game, which is what about 80% of people doing that in stadiums are doing today. It's silly, right? It's silly because the whole point of that stuff is to say, here's this really cool thing that we care about and we're a part of, and like we want to participate in it. And so what Jesus is not saying is that giving to the poor is a problem, or that prayer is a problem, or that fasting is a problem, but just that it kind of misses the point if you're just doing it for the attention of other people. So what is he actually calling us to think about? So he uses this word hypocrite, which is, there's a mask that's going to come up on stage. It's from 2,000 years ago. It's how people in a time before microphones like performed in a theater. There's actually a built-in like microphone into the clay mask, so there's amplification. Okay, so Jesus used the word hypocrite, which is not just what it means today, which is to say when people say one thing but then they do something else. It's to say you're just kind of playing a character. You just kind of have a mask on and you're doing these things, but your heart's not really in it. And that's a bummer because you really miss the point. Because the point of prayer, the point of giving, the point of fasting is something greater. So when Jesus was talking about giving, instead of like showing how awesome you are, how much cooler is it when you get to actually be part of like the way God works to help people in the world? That your generosity, your encouragement gets to help somebody else who's having a hard time. That's a pretty great thing to get to be part of. Instead of praying with big words and staying in the street to impress people, you get to actually talk to God about the things that are bouncing around in your head, your anxieties, your fears, your worries. And instead of like worrying about whether or not you need to like stop eating or drinking so that God will give you what you want, you can actually, sometime in your life, you might need to, hey, pause some of these other things that I'm doing to sort of line my heart and my mind, what Scott McKnight calls a full body prayer, to think about this particular thing that I'm trying to ask God to help me with. It's a beautiful invitation. And so this practices are not just to say, hey, look at how awesome we are, but rather to say, God deeply desires a relationship with us, and these are tools that help us get there. So what are we actually, if we were going to take that seriously, and we think that's pretty great, there's a couple of things to think about, and I'm just going to say them as quick sentences. and this is for the grown-ups, and these are for the little ones too, this is for all of us. We have to process the pressures that we're facing today. You have some kind of pressure in your life to impress someone, some group, something that makes you feel like okay enough. Our immediate context here, parents, do you feel any kind of pressure to already, even at a young age, like, well, we have to do these club sports and, like these activities and these things because we have to be a success. The question for our consideration would be, where are those pressures coming from? And are those pressures things that would even matter 100 years from now? You don't have to have children to have very similar pressures. You have pressure in your life today to sort of be a certain thing and do a certain thing. And a good thing for our consideration is, where does that come from? And is it actually something that matters? Because that's what God's trying to connect us to, the thing that matters most. This idea of prayer is a great moment to remind us of the real invitation, which is my third point, but let me jump backwards to the second. The opportunity, again, I've said it already, to be part of making a real impact in the world. In the giving analogy and the fasting analogy. The giving analogy, how cool is it that our little sacrifices could actually help people? That even if we don't have enough resources that people are going to blow trumpets and call parades and name buildings after us, we get to do things that actually help people when they're hurting. Or when there's really serious and heavy things happening in the world or in our lives, we can pause for a while and know that God is going to meet us and help us process those things. So we come back to the Lord's Prayer now to close as we think about this real invitation. There are some people that pray this prayer literally every day. They say it word for word. And there's other people that like the framework of it. They use it to help them understand the kinds of things they can pray about. And lots of books by lots and lots of smart people have been writing lots and lots of thoughts about which one is the right way to do it. But here's what I want to invite us to. The real invitation of the Lord's Prayer. To say, hey, instead of just behaving and pretending that everything's perfect in our lives, we get to slow our lives down and talk to God about the things going on in our story. So in verse 9, when it says, "Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name," it's a great reminder that there's lots of people we're trying to impress, and there's lots of things that we're often worried about, but there's something different about the name of God. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. That one of the things we can look around and see is that sometimes things aren't right. And we can ask for God's kingdom to make the kingdom of heaven to look a little bit more like Baltimore, that we can line ourselves up to that and think about, man, there's sometimes things that are kind of messy and sad happening around us. That we can ask God for help with our daily bread. That sometimes there's things that we really, really need. And then sometimes there's some things that we want, but we don't actually need, and we have a hard time figuring out what's what. Forgive us our debts as we've forgiven our debtors. Sometimes people hurt your feelings. Sometimes you hurt people's feelings. And sometimes it's really, really important to process which of those things needs to be something you're thinking about, and which of those things needs to be something where you need to let God forgive you so that you can move on. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. Sometimes there's some pressures that we're facing to go down some paths that aren't helpful. And sometimes we process our pressures in some ways that make a bad thing worse. And then sometimes there's really evil things happening in the world that we sort of purposefully or mistakenly find ourselves wrapped up in. So all of these things get to be stuff that we get to bring before God and say, God, help us. Help us even though we wear Kiss makeup to the Taylor Swift concert. Help us even when we're the person wearing cheese on our head at a Ravens game. Help us when we just get really, really confused about how the world should work. Communion is a chance for those of us who are followers of Jesus to just come back to the heart of what all of this is about. Not this grandstanding and posturing about how much we have it all together, but the simple admission of rediscovering the love of God the way we hope kids get it. And so, I don't know about you, but I know there's some dimensions of my heart that need that this morning, that need that encouragement, that need that challenge. And so this is a moment that we take time in our service to say, we're going to slow down and remember that when we were in a place where we were confused and messy, God moved towards us, sacrificed himself to move towards us. We remember that, we think about that, we dwell on that. I'm going to pray for us, and then we ask you and invite you who are followers of Jesus in the room to receive that from one of our 4 stations and to continue to celebrate it together as a community. God, we don't come to you as people who have it all together. We get really, really confused sometimes about how to live with all the pressures that we face. But we're grateful that you move towards us, and we're grateful that you give us help as we try and help people, as we try and help our own hearts. Help us to pray and remember who you are. Amen.